From the Middle is a founding member of the Odd Pods Media Network.
Oh, for the love.
Sorry, just clearing my Mountain Dew hole.
I got my phone hole cleaned today.
That's where you keep it? You're so cerebral and you're so developed and evolved.
From the Middle after dark over here.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to episode 94 of From the Middle. I am one of three hosts, Dylan, alongside Kendall, Corey, and a very special guest. But if you're listening for the first time, we are three middle-class guys living in the middle of America, in the middle chapters of our lives, with a point of view somewhere in the middle. And if that doesn't explain what we do, we're a comedy, culture, interview, and entertainment podcast. And we love doing good interviews. We broadcast out of Columbus, Ohio, but beam our show all over the world. And speaking of Columbus, Ohio, we have a guest. I'm so excited to talk food today. We have a guest, Matt Teegarden, Ph.D. food scientist. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. You have that intro down pat.
Man, you don't know how many times I've done it in the shower to try to make that sound smooth. So that's so nice of you to say that. And I'm so excited because we often get into food and just like we want to talk sandwiches or pizza. We had the Wizard of Za on not long ago for any Columbus folks. And we love talking about food, but you're like where we're just idiots, like trying to make a conversation out of it. You're an actual expert. And I'm so excited about that. So if you are listening from someplace that's not Ohio, please stay along for this episode because this is the kind of thing that could be interesting for any part of the world. You can go find local interesting foods and restaurants and businesses and things all over, or be on the creative edge of representing your area. So just because we're talking to somebody from Columbus about Columbus doesn't mean this isn't super relevant to anybody anywhere, because there are very wildly different diversities, like biomes of food all over the world that people can explore. So again, thank you so much for joining us today here on From the Middle. And I would love, we all know how the internet works, so people need to know that you're an expert. Tell us a little bit about your background and the Tasting Columbus show hosted by 614 Media. So just tell us a little about your background.
Yeah, I'll go back maybe 2008. I started at Ohio State. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. Thought I wanted to be an architect. Started taking those classes. Quickly realized I was bad at it. Not something I'm so talented at. But found my way to food science and technology through my love of chemistry, really. So I took a couple classes in food science, decided that was what I wanted to study, really caught the bug, decided to do a master's in it, decided to stay on for a PhD, so graduated 3 times from Ohio State, focusing a lot on foods and sort of their intersection with nutrition and health, but really just kind of a food geek all over. And a couple of years out of grad school in the working world, and saw this casting call from 614 for a food host, and I was like, well, I feel kind of qualified for that. So I answered. The craziest thing, I answered the casting call, and they picked me.
That's awesome. I can just imagine you filling out the application, putting your name like food science PhD.
Oh yeah,
on the thing, like,
that.
I just need you to know I'm qualified for this, by the way.
Well, it's really cool because the show, they actually are encouraging me to try and integrate science wherever I can. And so what's funny is I often have to hold myself back because I could do a whole show on, one topic, but it's fun for me to try and put those little quick bits in there. So hopefully you'll see more of those going forward as well.
Were you always charismatic, and did the hosting thing just come naturally, or was that like the bigger leap to take on a role like that?
That's a really good question. So, I think a lot of PhDs, we tend to have this sort of stereotype where we're a little nerdy. We don't necessarly have the
That's what I was trying
skills
to say, but I didn't want to just come out and say it.
You know what? I'm really lucky to have I guess this skill set, and it's something that I was able to exercise a lot in graduate school. I went through a lot of leadership training, and also really found a love for science communication. And so I was able to sort of exercise that part of my brain while I was also doing some hardcore scientific research. And so this was another opportunity for me to put it into practice in sort of a real setting.
That's
So
super
with
interesting. Go ahead, Kendall.
the food science things. So this is uh, my wife and I. We both watched through all of the stuff on Tasting Columbus, and um, my wife's line of questioning that I always ask her what we should ask this guest, and so she's a chemist. She has a PhD in clinical chemistry,
Mhm.
and her entire line of questioning goes to the heart of how can she become you. She's wondering, so what exactly did you study? How do you get to be into that program? Do my credits transfer? Do you need help?
No, that's the thing with food science. It's an applied science, and so you can do so much with it within the field. So there's people that focus on food microbiology. So they're people that understand those basics of microbiology but apply them to food. I'm by training a food chemist, and so I take chemistry and apply it to food to understand it. And I actually did a lot of work with people in like clinical sciences at Ohio State. You know, I never dreamed I would be working in like a molecular biology laboratory working with cancer cells while treating them with berry extracts. You know, it's one of those things that was kind of a great place, and there's so many good collaborations in there, and you're able to really bridge across a lot with food science. It's so interdisciplinary.
That's fun. Before we recorded, we were chatting a little bit about kind of some of the small world relationships that we have found with you. I'm just going to throw one out there then. Studying at Ohio State in chemistry, I have no idea exactly what it is, but my wife has lectured a couple of chemistry things. So are you familiar with a Dr. Amy Pyle?
I'm not.
No. Okay. I think my guess is she would have been lecturing on pathology or something blood related.
Oh yeah, see, I didn't take a lot of clinical chemistry classes.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly organic, yeah, that kind of stuff.
Well, the good news is if she wants to become your job, I'm sure you'll be hearing from her soon.
Yeah.
So expect phone calls and emails.
That's what she wants. She wants to try to bridge the gap between clinical chemistry and then figure out how to taste food. Like that's what she wants to do.
This whole podcast episode is just a ploy for her to do just that.
Yeah. Is she behind the camera there?
So that the pivot to food science is kind of interesting. So for you, that happened in Ohio State. For some of your peers, did they have like backgrounds where in like junior high and high school they were telling you that they were already into that kind of thing? Like, or is this something a lot of people kind of get into chemistry and then start like diving off into different paths once they hit college?
It's so funny you mentioned that, because I have never heard, well, that's false. A lot of the stories I hear about how people come into food science are not linear. So it's few and far between that people have heard of food science and just wanted to do that coming out of high school. It is an agricultural science, so food science is typically in like College of Agriculture at land grant institutions, and so there might be people that were participating in like 4-H or Future Farmers of America that maybe had some exposure to what food science actually was. But as someone who grew up in the suburbs of Cincinnati and had never heard of 4-H or FFA, I was totally naive to any of the agricultural sciences. And I think that's a lot of my colleagues that work in the science of food also kind of found it through these, different ways. A lot of people, I think, and myself included for a little bit, were pre-med and looking for an interesting major, and then ended up loving it. So it's interesting, and I would say to work in food, you don't have to study food science. A lot of chemical engineers work in the food industry, other sort of basic scientists as well, and they can find their way into basically being a food scientist.
Yeah, but you specifically like have the best job ever. So,
I mean, I get to taste food all day.
Hosting a show, tasting not just any food, but
good food. The only thing I will say that's challenging is that you have a camera right in your face. As you're
That's
Yeah,
a
so
whole
we
other
all figured
element
about
that you've got to be thinking about, as like, how am I taking this bite? And like, is it, because you can't just, it's not just like when you're with a buddy and you can just like, grab a burger and, you've got this whole other element of like showing. I would be the awkward person in the commercial, like trying to prop up the cheeseburger to like try. So it's this
Oh,
whole other thing.
oh,
But
it's awkward. It's still awkward when I do it, and it
I was
just
gonna say, like,
editing is really good.
like how weird does it feel? Like, do you think about the fact that like people are about, there's a camera in front of me that's going to watch me take a bite of something like that? That just feels like an uncomfortable situation. I don't want people to watch me bite food. Like, what if I don't know how I would screw it up, but what if I screw it up and it looks funny?
It's at first it was super uncomfortable. Like, I was the person that when I was chewing a bite, I'd cover my mouth with my hand so no one could see me even chew, even though they know I'm chewing. But I had to get over that really fast, and they love the close up of me going into like a big sandwich, right? Like when we went to What the Waffle and I dove into the breakfast sandwich, and that's just something that I know that's what they're looking for, and I just go for it, and it's a little shameless, but I also get to like eat that whole bite, so it's great.
Well, that's a perfect segue to take a couple steps back. So I very briefly mentioned you're the host of Tasting Columbus. This is a web series by 614 Media, and feel free to correct me if any point if I'm wrong. But you get to hop into these all different kinds of food stops around Columbus, and then you've even got cool little ads spliced in, from different spots around Columbus as well.
Mhm.
So it's this really great picture you've painted of different restaurants in different parts of town, stuff that, as much as I love food as an amateur foodie, stuff I've not heard of. So it's so great to get to see different spots highlighted. And that's what you're doing. You're 2 episodes in so far as of this moment.
Yes.
And do you have a certain number of these planned, or just as long as they'll let you do it?
I'm not quite sure how many we have planned. I'm planning to go as long as they would like. But we have a really great team at 614 that helps scout the locations, sort of find these interesting spots. And like you said, you've never heard of some of these spots. I've never heard of some of these spots. I thought I got out around in Columbus, and maybe not so much in the past year, but I thought that I kind of knew all there was about the Columbus food scene. But there's so much left to explore, and so many new businesses popping up that are just so fun. We have such a great food scene here.
Yeah, so why do you think that is? I've heard a lot of different rationale behind why Columbus is a great test market. Some say it's because we have like a kind of a neutral Midwestern palate. I thought it was because Columbus is kind of a microcosm of the nation. So like race, color, creed, background, like Columbus is this, all the ratios are perfectly reduced down to Columbus's population. And so that's why like a lot of why it becomes this test market. Like, why do you think it's so good? It makes for such a rich food scene.
Yeah, so you're actually highlighting a couple interesting things. So Columbus is actually known as a really good test market. Like companies will come here and do consumer panels on their products to get readings on how well they might perform, nationwide. And I would say it's definitely more because we have a good mix of people here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that someone's necessarily going to want to test their product against some sort of like monolithic palette or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get a good reading across many different types of palettes and tastes and preferences. And so I think that's part of the reason why Columbus itself is kind of used as that test bed. And I think part of the reason why we have a good food scene here is that Columbus is such an interesting place that we have such a rich community that is very invested in Columbus. It's hard to find someone who lives here who's like, ugh, I hate Columbus. Everyone who lives here and even comes from bigger cities is like, I was so surprised by Columbus. I love Columbus so much. And, I think part of that lends itself to building up the food community. I think we have some adventurous eaters here. And like, there's a lot of really cool little spots around town that are sort of more global cuisine that I think are really interesting to explore. I mean, people that friends that come from, New York that might have, lots of different types of, groceries of different ethnicities and things like that. They're surprised to come to Columbus and see that we also have like a similar number of different types of groceries. Just as an example. So I think we have sort of that adventurous heart, but also that strong community that wants to support the city.
Yeah,
You
that's
mentioned a
awesome.
little bit
I
about.
think.
Go ahead, Dill.
Go ahead. I
No,
was
you
just going to
meant.
say, I think the universities certainly help. Having a handful of universities, Ohio State being one of the biggest in the country, certainly draws a big mixture of people. And so I think there's a lot of businesses that are trying to cater to that clientele base of all this, not only the suburban folks and the
Right.
white collar businesses, but also this mixture of students that's thrown in there as well. And I fortunately for the rest of us that just live here all the time, all those students keep coming and going in large numbers, and keep the demographics mixed up really nicely to, so
Right.
there's always a desire for variety.
Right.
And that's not in no way an expert opinion, but even my time at Ohio State, I saw some of that, just as a desire to fulfill for some of these folks coming in to go to school at Capitol or Ohio State or CCAD, any of those places.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Go ahead, Corey.
You talked a little bit about the team you work with at 614 and the scouting that they do. How do you kind of deduce which places you're going to visit and how to compile them into one episode? Because you visit about 4 per episode, right?
Right. Yeah, 3 to 4. So in terms of how that happens, I think some of it is people reach out to us and ask, hey, we're interested in being on Tasting Columbus. How can we make this happen? I always send them to our producer, Steph, who does a great job of talking to the restaurant, understanding, their goals and things like that. And then I think there is also some of, the team from 614 reaching out to make sure that we're covering sort of a wide basis and highlighting some Columbus mainstays as well.
So one of the places you visited in episode 2 is High Banks Distillery, and shout out to my buddy Adam Hines, my CCAD buddy, who is a co-owner over there. What was kind of your favorite thing about what they're doing over there? Because that smoked old fashioned looked delicious.
Oh my God. Let me tell you. First off, I went to High Bank. I used to live by High Bank over in Grandview. So I knew they had great food. I knew they had great drinks. And I hadn't been in a while. So I was really excited to check it out with the show. And I had not had that smoked old fashioned. And so I went there to do a little bit of research and try out the drink before we actually filmed. And I saw the way that they not plate, but sort of present the drink to you. And I saw that and I was like, we need slow motion of that. And I like warned the camera people. I was like, you're going to want to get in on that drink.
Yeah.
And the shots that they got were, we have really talented people on the crew. The shots that they got were amazing. It looked just as good as it tastes. And so I think the smoked old fashioned was a favorite. That chicken sandwich, the fried chicken sandwich, yeah. I love anything crispy. I'll always call it out on the show. Because I love crispy food, and that chicken sandwich was great.
It was interesting too, because I've seen smoked old fashions done a variety of different ways. Sometimes they sort of like pipe it with hoses into the drink. I've seen where they actually will burn the bitters on top of the drink and kind of stir it while they're doing it. But I've never seen like it captured like that over the wood, and that was really, really cool.
What I love about that too is that it doesn't, sometimes when you get a smoky drink, depending on how they do it, it's too smoky for me. Mm-hmm. I love a good smoke flavor, but when it really dominates what the flavor of the drink is supposed to be, it's too much. And what they do is they light the wood chips, they put the glass over it, it coats the inside of the glass, and then they pour it into that. And so you get like a whiff of the smoke as you're drinking the drink, and you get some of the flavor that's infused from when it coated the glass, but it's just the right amount. Yeah. So I really like how they do it.
That's cool.
So right. When it comes to the food, and it sounds like you had mentioned that, well, you did say that you kind of scout it out, right? You go there and you figure out what it is you want to eat and test. And I'm wondering if there's, well, is it always that way? And if not, like a kind of a weird question that I have are there limitations to things that you would do? Like for me, for example, like I loved the waffle place, and if I were to go to any one of the like 8 places that I've seen right now, it would be that one.
Mhm.
However, like I can't stand caviar. And so for me, it would be like, that sounds delicious. Don't expect me to eat the caviar because my face will do things on camera that you don't want me to. Like, are there things that you like won't try? Or, I don't know.
Yeah, well, so I'll answer your first question first. So, a lot of the times the location scouting that's done and deciding on the dishes, that's not me actually. So a lot of times I'm going into this, I might know what I'm trying. Typically they'll put it in the show notes. But I kind of like to be surprised. This one, I specifically wanted to research the smoked old fashioned because I wanted to make sure I could talk about the smoke flavor correctly. Researching. um, but I wanted to make sure I could talk about the science behind the smoke flavor correctly, because depending on what wood they're burning or how they're incorporating the smoke flavor would impact how I talked about it.
Mhm.
So that was, I wanted to make sure I got the science right, and I wanted a little drink. But in terms of, any food aversion, so I grew up a very picky eater. My parents, I'll talk to them and they're like, I can't believe you're hosting a food show. Like, you used to be the pickiest eater. But honestly, through studying food science, you're kind of with all these people that love food, right? And so that environment really opened up my eyes and my palate, if we're going to use that terminology, right? To different types of food. And so there are still some foods that I don't love. I will eat them though, because I am kind of in this this part of my life where I'm determined to try new foods and foods that I might not like prepared a different way. So for instance, beets are not one of my favorite foods. That earthy taste that comes actually from a chemical in the beets that they make naturally. It's called geosmin. It tastes like dirt to me, and like a really offensive dirt taste. Some people love it, some people don't. And depending on how you prepare beets, I think you can kind of maybe get rid of that a little bit. I've had beets prepared in certain ways that I've actually been able to eat them. And so the salad at High Bank had beets in it, and I was a little nervous because I didn't want to say anything that might offend the chef or kind of show my hand too much. But the beets were actually quite delicious and went really well with the salad. So, but there are things I'm averse to, but I'm always going to try it. I'm game for anything.
I have to go back to that episode now when you're describing the ingredients or the chef is, and you're like, oh, beets.
Yeah.
That sounds nice.
Yeah.
That's
I have to keep my poker face, right?
Well, it works for you that you're already animated, so it just played very nicely into the whole thing. It was great. So we have to take a quick dive into the Columbus pizza scene for a minute. Okay,
Yes,
so
please.
you've been two of your choices that you've been to so far, Torita's and Meatball Mafia. We mentioned, as we were discussing before, anyone who's listening, we had Spencer Saylor from the Wizard of Za on not long ago, and we got to talk to him about his very specific kind of pizza. And so I want to talk a little bit about the Columbus style of pizza and then your experiences, because I think Torita's kind of falls more in the Columbus style of pizza, right?
I would say so. I'm not one to discriminate against any pizza. I will eat all pizza. And I would say that to me, like Torita's did kind of come off more as, this Midwestern, like Columbus-y type of pizza. It's not quite New York style. The crust is a little too thick for that. It's cooked in this, very like kind of like old fashioned, like 1950s kind of like oven almost with the conveyor belt and things like that. So yeah, I guess I would call it maybe a Columbus style pizza.
So for anyone outside of Columbus, that's not an insult at all, too. That's a compliment. Columbus style is generally thin crust. It's cut in strips, not in like pie style. And it's usually heavy toppings. So nationally, people can kind of think of like Donato's is a chain based out of Columbus that a lot of people associate with Columbus style, but that was one of the originals. And then you had Meatball Mafia, very different than Torita's, very different, but also not a bad thing because there's a lot of different pizza around town.
Right.
And I was looking at Torita's and then I was looking at Meatball Mafia almost like back to back. I watched the 2 episodes right together. Very different. And there was like the meat sauce in the Meatball Mafia.
Look,
So tell me about that after going to Torita's and getting the white pizza with the like special handmade sausage and then going to Meatball Mafia.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, up front, both pizzas were very good, but they were so different. Growing up in Ohio, the Torita's pizza felt like home to me. You know, it's like you said, cut in strips and heavy on toppings. That sausage was so good with the fat that like renders down to the crust. I mean, you can't beat that. But like what I didn't know, so at Meatball Mafia, they make this pizza. It's not a deep dish pizza, but it's a very thick crust that I think it almost mimics deep dish, just very shallow. Shallow dish, right? I don't know. But he
Deepish.
He called it deep dish. Yeah. He called it like a Youngstown style pizza, which was news to me. I had no idea that was a thing. I know Youngstown has some interesting like food culture around it. The most famous maybe being the wedding cookie table, which is a thing in Northeast Ohio. But the sauce was so meaty. I'd never had like such a meaty sauce on a pizza before, and it was so satisfying. Honestly, I mean, it was like, I don't think I could eat a whole pizza of that like I could eat a whole pizza of like normal Columbus pizza, but
it was so interesting. It reminded me of like the parent or the grandparent who makes like spaghetti meat sauce with just like ground beef mixed in with the marinara and then dumped on the noodles to make like a really meaty.
Yes.
And I'm watching him spread that in the video. I'm like, that looks like a spaghetti meat sauce that he's putting as the base.
That's what it reminded me of as well. And that's why I say I couldn't eat a whole one, because it's just so hearty. Like it's you would fill up so quickly on that. I mean, I'm kind of salivating thinking about it, honestly.
Well, I think he actually said that, like, well, so Meatball Mafia, like it looks like they specialize in meatballs, and it's like, well, here's the meatball sandwich, here's the bowl of meatballs, and so that sauce, I think he said, was like just smashed up meatballs and sauce, right? So but anyway, like I just want to speak for a minute that like I thought that I knew pizza in Columbus relatively well, and then Wizard of Zaw happens, and I have, for the very first time in my life, vodka sauce on a pizza.
Oh.
And it blew me away to the point that I'm like, why isn't everybody doing a vodka pizza? This seems like low-hanging fruit. And then I see the Meatball Mafia thing, and I've never even had that pizza yet, but like I'm thinking a meat sauce. It's
right.
Like, why? I've never had it. It's already one of my favorites. Why isn't everybody doing a meat sauce pizza?
Right. When I saw it, I was like, what? What?
It was so good. And I all but demanded Spencer Saylor sell me a jar of vodka sauce for pasta at home.
Oh yeah.
It was so good. He was very gracious. And I love the pizza discussion. Why don't we take a really quick break? We'll hear from a few of our friends in the Odd Pods Media Network. We'll be right back.
Welcome everybody to the Potaskew Podcast. I am...
Whoa, dude. No. This is our promo, not the show. I'm Rico.
Oh, sorry. I'm CJ, and we're the hosts of the Potaskew Podcast.
We're fans of pretty much anything and everything pop culture, including movies, TV shows, books, video games, comics, music, and of course, Kevin Smith. Now, while we do keep our fingers on the pulse of Silent Bob, he certainly doesn't need our help in promoting him.
You got that right. We do our own thing, with inspiration from the man himself and his mantra of why not. We've got stories about celebrities we've interviewed, theories of our own for certain movies, and we can usually tend to have a great debate about anything.
We also do commentaries on movies. Sometimes we ask our fans what they want to watch with us. So if you love the timbre of our vocal cords and want to watch a movie at the same time, give us a listen.
Stay tuned every Monday. There's always something new. And if you've been good this year, we may even give you a bonus episode from time to time.
So please be good and subscribe to and enjoy Pod Askew, founding member of the Odd Pods Media Network.
We've just wrapped up a delicious conversation about pizza, and I am very excited now to try some of the different options from Meatball Mafia and Torritos. But I do want to know, Matt, before we were recording, we talked a little bit about you kind of inserting some food science into the episodes.
Yes.
And I definitely want to hear more of that. You can even do it on this podcast right now. You can just throw random facts out. That's fine. But I do want to know, what's the most interesting thing that you've learned from the restaurants that you've visited? Are there any little like cooking tips or things that kind of tie into your world that you picked up that you went, I've never tried that, or I didn't know this would do that? Or is there anything that like caught you off guard? It's okay to say no, you have a PhD, but I did want to.
Well, and that's the thing, as a food scientist, I really I concentrated on analyzing food, like chemical profile wise, right? I didn't focus on how food cooks. There are food scientists that do that, but you know what? I watch a lot of Top Chef, so it's hard. It can be hard to surprise me in terms of cooking techniques. But what I love is that this is giving me sort of a new appreciation for a lot of that sort of basic food science knowledge. I can see a chef, cook shrimp and see that it turns pink, and then I can think, oh yeah, it turns white to pink because it has these compounds in it called carotenoids that provide a lot of the colors for different fruits and vegetables and leaves and things like that when they turn yellow. And those types of compounds, those carotenoids, are also in shrimp, but they're bound to a protein. And so when you cook, the protein denatures, it breaks apart and releases the carotenoid, revealing that beautiful pink color. And so it's kind of crazy, but you see that and you think of it, and the chef says, oh, it's done when it's pink, and it's just interesting to think through how that could have even come to be, and the science behind that. And so it's giving me this chance to sort of appreciate these different pieces of knowledge that I have. And I'm also I am a National College Bowl runner-up 2 times in a row, food science quiz bowl competition. Nice. Really cool. Yeah. But even those facts, those are facts that I just have in the back of my brain, and this is kind of helping me relive some of those and bring some of those out. So it's a lot of fun in that way for me as well.
I love that. It reminds me of some of the you'll see Netflix or whatever do these cooking shows like Top Chefs in the World or whatever. And it reminds me of when you find somebody will go to a traditional French culinary school, but then they're experimenting with food and dry ice and all this crazy stuff to make these totally new twists and modernized twists on dishes. And it reminds me of that. It's the technical knowledge and then this just kind of ethereal, I just know how to cook with these things from the garden mixed with all this weird, crazy, cool technical stuff.
Right. And that's what's really fun for me is, something that I say a lot is that even now as I'm trying to, I used to bake a lot, but now I'm trying to cook more like actual food. And part of it is really fun because I know all the scientific side of things, but the creative side of it, the artistic side of food, is something that as a scientist, I'm trying to appreciate more. So not only can I be closer to food, but I can talk about it better.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That I think the Wario sandwiches, there was an art to how he was putting different toppings and things on the sandwiches and how everything looked at the end, and he's slicing through the sandwich to show you this cross diagram of
oh my God.
There's an art to that for sure. And if you think that dude's just making sandwiches, you are very mistaken.
Oh yeah, I've been back honestly several times since we filmed. when we filmed, that was my first introduction, and I've gone back and I make sure I say hi to him every time. But he is doing work there. I mean, that cheese sauce, the homemade cheese whiz he makes is just incredible, and the meat on the sandwiches is so tender. Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah, when he's talking about all the places in the world that he has these ingredients shipped from, and then he drizzles that cheese whiz sauce over the whole sandwich, I'm like, how fast can I get down to Nationwide?
Well, and the thing is too, he talks a lot about how he spent a ton of time and energy trying to find the perfect bread. And actually, I think when we filmed was sort of like around when he settled on his perfect bread for his sandwich. And not having had the sandwich before that, which I'm sure was also incredible, the bread he uses, it's from a local baker here in Columbus. It really brings it home. It's so, like, it's so good.
Yeah, that's great.
Let's talk about the sort of the food scene, and I don't know if this is just a Columbus thing or a national thing, but when we were growing up, you seem to be about our age, but a gentleman never asks. Uh, Growing up was when I remember sort of the sports bar thing coming to life and all of these franchises
Mhm.
popping up. Applebee's being the first one in my life, and and there are a billion of them, and now they're all going out of business. And it seems to me, at least in Columbus, what they're being replaced with is this hot new thing where it's the same foods, but everybody's using the word elevated, right? And so like they still do fish and chips, only now you go to 101 Beer Kitchen and it's like it's a better fish and chips, and they're like making their own spicy tartar sauce and that kind of thing. Is that so? Just kind of speak to that trend, that whole idea of like we're making the same things, but we're making them better, and or is it that we're sourcing them more locally, or is it both? It seems to be a really trendy thing right now to do
The gastropub.
Yeah.
to do sports bar food, but we're going to just like do every little piece of it just a little better or a little differently.
Yeah, I'll speak on that as best as I can. It's one of those things that I think there's definitely, we obviously have more of an appreciation, I think, for local fare and things like that. People are eating a lot more consciously. So it's not only about if the food tastes good. People care a lot more about how animals were raised, where food comes from, things like that. So there's a lot more of a conscious awareness around what people choose to purchase and eat. And then I think too, like, kind of again, going back to like Top Chef and things like that, sort of this like burgeoning, not even burgeoning anymore, it's already here, like the reality sort of food shows that people can watch. It makes a lot of these culinary terms maybe a little bit more accessible, and people want to experience these things a little bit more. That's, at least that's my own theory. It makes me a little bit more adventurous in what I might choose to try, or I'll see something on the menu and be like, oh, they did that on Top Chef, I have to try that, things like that. So I think people are kind of appreciating some of those things a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd never thought of it that way before, that like we're all watching this stuff on TV now, and therefore like the baseline knowledge of the community has gone from here to here. And
I think in some aspects, yeah.
Yeah. And so like for example, when I was watching the what's it, the waffle place that I forget the name. What was it? What are they again called?
What the Waffle.
What the Waffle. That's right. I could have just asked a different way and stumbled
right
upon it. So What the Waffle, I think it was them that made a shrimp and grits for you.
Oh yeah.
And when they, to be honest with you, when I first heard that they were making a shrimp and grits, my eyes rolled a little bit. just because it's like, I mean, shrimp and grits, like that's, we've been doing shrimp and grits for a decade.
Yeah.
And but like their shrimp and grits wasn't just shrimp and grits. Like her shrimp and grits was like, here's shrimp and grits, but also gumbo. Yeah. And like the Dewey sausage and
okay, so that shrimp and grits, I haven't eaten a lot of shrimp and grits. I tend to go to other breakfast food, but I love shrimp and I love like mushy things, so of course it's a dish that I'm gonna like. But she definitely elevates it, to use that term, right? She puts the shrimp, she puts the andouille sausage, the tomato broth, I think is what is called on the menu, that she puts on the shrimp and grits. Stole the show for me. Like, that was, to use a Top Chef term, the star of the dish. It was so good. And on the show, you see me take maybe 1 or 2 bites. That was one of those dishes that cameras are off, I'm still eating it.
Mhm.
I took that home to make sure I had the leftovers because it was that good. And I think part of it too, something like shrimp and grits, right? That's Southern food. And, you might be able to go to like Cracker Barrel and get some grits or something like that. But that's kind of like a little bit of a food transplant for us maybe here in Columbus, right? You're not going to go maybe a ton of places and be able to find it on a menu at a place like that, or a local place. And so I think it's kind of fun to see that on a menu in that space too.
What I love about that too is like it feels to me, I would call it specialty food, feels a lot to me like specialty retail. So in the same sense that if you're not at like a mega store that can offer everything, if you want to be a retailer at this point, you need to find your niche and do that thing really well because there's already a million other options. And it feels like what's happening with food, like all the places that are trying to have this massive menu and trying to do everything, they're not doing any of it well. So you've got all these specialty places popping up that are like, I'm just going to do my thing and I'm going to nail it. And that feels like what the Waffle and Wizard of Za and Hot Chicken Takeover. And we've seen some of these places, Ph.D. and Bibi Bop, all these little places that pop up around Columbus. And it feels like specialty retail, but calling it specialty food. And I'm sure a food industry expert would like already have terms for all of that and know exactly why that's all happening. But I think that goes back to what you were saying about like people want better quality. They want healthier and better.
Mhm.
And I think the restaurants that are appealing to that are the ones that are doing exactly that. Like, I'm just going to find my couple things and just hit it out of the park and do
Right.
that super, super well and do it as with the best ingredients I can and as healthy as I can if I'm trying to be. And so I love that other perspective to it because I think it all kind of plays into that. Like, let's just specialize and all the food's going to taste better instead of,
Right.
the only place I know that can do that is like Cheesecake Factory that somehow has a massive menu and seems to make all of it. Other than that, it's like everything else is getting smaller and finding their niche to exist.
I was going to say there's one place with a giant menu that I will fully endorse. Not officially, of course, but yeah, Cheesecake Factory, they make good stuff. But yeah, I think part of it too, and even if like you're trying to indulge and eat, quote unquote unhealthy, I want it to be worth it, right? I want to have that, stellar piece of fried chicken if that's like the only piece of fried chicken I'm going to have for a while. If I'm going to get a dessert at a restaurant, I want it to be damn good because I don't always eat dessert at a restaurant. And so I think that's a really good point that you bring up that, you do have a lot of these places that are specializing. The number of like donut shops we have popping up, it's so interesting to see now that you say that. That's kind of like a new light for me to see it through. These people, they're really specializing in those core dishes.
Well, I think another thing Columbus does really well is, and this could just be because we're from a town of 3,000 people in Northwest Ohio, but they do the experience really well. Like going to Brewdog in Canal is an experience, like this huge building in the really cool outdoor patio area, and you can play games and you get to tour the brewery also. Like it's just experience. And oh, by the way, the food's amazing. You could go to Buca and you can go underground and sit at the Pope table and with 14 other people, right? And so, but that can't be everything, right? It has to ultimately deliver on quality. But if you can do quality and experience, there's something so fun about taking a group of friends down to Dirty Frank's and then going to 16-bit next door. Like it's all about the experience of it. That's just really fun. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that adds to the experience.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, like the atmosphere is definitely a big part of it. And, I'll put a little food science bit in here as well. So like sensory and consumer science is kind of part of food science. There's a lot of food scientists that focus on sensory science. And actually one of the researchers at Ohio State focuses on sort of environment and how that affects how much you might like a food. And so it's interesting to talk about that because I think the experience plays a big part into how good something tastes and what might keep you coming back. They say a wine always tastes better at the vineyard. And I think part of that, right, is the environment. Hopefully it's at least a little bit of the wine too, because you might buy it and take it home. But it's one of those things that, you know, I think you're exactly right, Corey, that Columbus does do. We have a lot of great restaurants that create that environment, and they're in sort of these fun areas that allow you to have a great experience for a fun night out.
Yeah, another one that comes to mind is if you're in German Village and you want to stand outside for 2 hours to wait for your table at Thurman Cafe, like that's a whole fun experience because you're with your friend who's never tried the Terminator before, and you're like, it makes for this whole wonderful evening. So yeah, I love, that's one of my favorite things. We have some friends that might be visiting this summer from the UK and other podcast friends of our show, and I'm like, which place do we take them to? There's so many good
all the places.
There's so many good places to take them to.
That's it. You can just drop them in German Village and tell them which direction do you want to go,
right?
And it's and even then, like just German Village, like you've got, everybody knows of Schmitz, everybody knows of Thurman's, but I mean, so like I lived there for a while, and I tell you what, like the small little places that are run by a 90-year-old lady who is just like cooking up sausage and literally on your plate. It's not dressed up at all. It's just like a bratwurst with which, like, just like a steamed bratwurst looks pretty bland and boring next to mashed potatoes, like your mom served it up for you at home, and nothing else on the plate. But it's like the best bratwurst you've ever had.
Right.
And like the presentation in that case meant nothing, but the atmosphere was that of the lady who's serving you doesn't speak English. And there's like, literally I was there, my wife and I weren't married yet, we were dating, we were there together, and I was just like, I was wearing like a sport coat over like a polo shirt or something, so it just kind of like slightly dressed up, and we were standing in line to pay for our meal, and of course there's an accordion player and a vocalist performing during the dinner hours there, and they didn't speak English, and or one of them kind of did, and so the singer was saying something to me in German, and I'm just like looking at her and smiling, and she said it again, and I'm just like, I don't know. And then the lady playing the accordion says, she says, "You look like real man." I was like, so they're like, the atmosphere, like that was just like the character of the people running the place was enough to make the experience worth doing.
Yeah.
And Kendall was there every day for the next 3 weeks.
Right. He speaks German by the end of it.
Yeah. So that's when my date became a little bit jealous, and then she said yes when I asked her to marry me.
So.
Nice. That's a nice way to end it. Has there been any other moments that like that really caught you off guard in any of these restaurants? I mean, I know some of the banter is fun as you're watching and probably unexpected, because you can always tell somebody who's been doing a thing for a long time. They have their lines that they love to interact with people. But have any of the moments caught you off guard? You've been thrown into like, hey, you're going to help me cook, or you got to do this, or tell us about some of those moments as a little behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, first off, I love getting in the kitchen and cooking with these people, because that's like, I feel like when I get to really experience the food and come alive and get excited to taste it. And I would say that there's been a couple instances, actually both of them at Mikey's Diner in Franklinton, when I was taken in the kitchen. I'm sorry, Tommy's Diner in Franklinton. I don't know why I call it Mikey's Diner. I've did that before too. Tommy's Diner in Franklinton. He brought me back in the kitchen, and he wanted me to flip one of the eggs. And I think this made it on the show. I have not flipped an egg. I flip eggs all the time. I fry eggs all the time. I was like, I got this. And first off, I like positioned the spatula wrong, but the surface of the skillet is so slippery, like, and so it was impossible to flip it, and I screwed it up. Like, So that was a little bit of a bummer. And then he had me try and, flip the vegetables in the pan later on in the episode. And I screwed that up too. And I'm like, dang it. Like, people are going to think that I can't cook after this.
Well, you just tell them I'm a baker by trade.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
But it was
something
funny
that's
too,
entirely
because-
not true of you, like early on in the episodes of Tasting Columbus, you have now established for the viewership who you are, and it's completely off base. But their
Exactly. Yeah.
narrative of you is the goofy guy now.
Exactly. I mean, hey, you know what? As if I can, give a face to PhDs that are maybe not so stuffy and in the ivory tower, I'm happy to do it.
There you go.
But it's one of those things too that him and I we had great banter because he was doing like everything perfect. And I was messing everything up, but it was a lot of fun.
Speaking of eggs in your show, one of the episodes vindicated me. So the other day I was bored and I wanted to do a time lapse of me just making my breakfast sandwich that I usually make. But I break the yolks because it's easier to cut it and put it on the sandwich. I got lit up on Facebook from so many people were like, you ruined it. The drippy yolk is the best part of the egg sandwich. And at What the Waffle, she broke the yolk right away because she's like, it's easier to cut and put on the sandwich. And I'm like, yes.
You know what? And it's easier to eat on camera because think of that runny yolk going down your face. I mean, yeah, I'm all for like, over hard on a sandwich. I think that makes a lot of sense, just practically speaking. But at BrewDog, they put an egg on the California burger, I think it was called, and that, of course, me biting into it made the cover for the show. But I was really afraid of how that egg would just explode all over my face, and it did a little bit actually. I had to clean up a little bit afterwards.
I have to say, as somebody who loves a burger, I have an aversion to the words California and a sandwich typically in the name, because I'm like, they're going to put all kinds of stuff on there I'm not going to want. And I'm not super picky, but like, it's just like the West Coast style of food isn't always exactly what I'm looking for first on the menu. And so as he's saying California burger or whatever the name, I'm thinking, okay. And then he started building it and I was very intrigued very quickly. And the bacon was like an afterthought as he's building it. I feel like in the show, it's like, oh, and there's bacon. And I'm like, star of the show, man. Let's not like play down the bacon at all.
And it's like
the bacon.
It's the crispiest bacon too, so it's just perfect for a burger.
Yeah, I was very excited to see that the California burger get made. And now, honestly, I think if I went to BrewDog next, that would be the first thing I would order. So I love the whole premise of the show because I know my wife and I watched both episodes back to back that are out so far, and all those places got added to our list of things we need to try, and probably half of them at least we hadn't heard of. And so it was so great, not only just the items, but also the places and to get your take on them and see the people behind it, because the people make it interesting, right? Like the quality of food has to matter. The experience of going there matters, but the people also help make it. And you go to Tommy's, you go to What the Waffle or any of these places and you see the personality there. And it just, my wife was like in love with the What the Waffle owner. Like she was just like, I love her. I want to go there and get food immediately.
Gail is, first and foremost, an amazing person. And so it was great to meet her, learn about sort of her mission with the restaurant. But of course, she's also a great cook. And so, tasting her food was just as fun. But you're right. It's learning about these people. So many family businesses, right? Like the Goodie Shop in Upper Arlington has been in their family for years. And What the Waffle will continue to be in her family. Her daughter is opening up a store in Georgia, I believe, maybe in the Atlanta area. And then right with Tommy's Diner, like that's also multi-generational. So it's really cool to see some of the history behind some of the places, and also talk to people that are starting fresh. You'll see a couple people in our next episode that this is kind of their first venture into the restaurant business, maybe after having a food truck, kind of like Meatball Mafia. And it's fun to see them kind of adapt to this new life and career.
So you'd mentioned Gail and the owner of What the Waffle, and then one of the things that I've noticed about you is you have this beautiful kind of malleability to you that so you can go to What the Waffle, and Gail is very much like oh, come here, like let me put you under my wing and feed you some really delicious stuff, and like kind and caring, and I just had this sense of like she's just trying to take care of you while you were there, and then you go to Tommy's diner, and he's a smartass, right? And that's but you just like fit perfectly with both of those people, and so like that's a skill or a talent. I don't know if that's learned or if that's just who you are, but what it does is that takes you like out of the food science world, and that puts you now into the like TV host kind of world. And I'm wondering like what other kinds of things have you learned outside of food science that you've realized, oh, this is a skill that's really helpful for what I'm doing now, or this is something about me that this is the reason why this works for me?
You know what? First off, thank you for saying that. I'm blushing a little bit. That was really nice. but you know, I've always been very much a people person. I love, you know, meeting new people, learning their stories, things like that. And you know, with my education, I was really fortunate to be involved with my professional society that exposed me to a lot of people, you know, outside of my immediate world. I was even able to travel with them, you know, to South Africa and Ireland and all these different places. And so being able to just meet such a diverse group of people and understand where they're coming from, I think has helped me sort of appreciate everyone's individuality. And I don't know, I'm very much an optimist. So I try and approach everyone, you know, kind of lovingly and you know, looking to bring out the best in them. And I guess that shows through. So that, you know, I appreciate hearing that. That's really nice.
It definitely makes for great content. And I'm also wondering if you took any improv classes, because one of the tidbits we learned before we recorded was that other than the intro, it's not scripted. So you're just kind of, for the most part, you're just having this conversation real time, and the jokes real time, and there were a lot around the meat sauce and the meatballs, but that's like a very
puns, and I feel like there is some very careful editing that occurred.
But you do that part really well too. I mean, it just flows very naturally, and so I would be surprised if they don't want to keep you as long as humanly possible.
Well, thank you. Yeah, improv is one of those things that going into this, you know, the first episode, I went in honestly a little blind. I didn't really know what to expect. And then like this real camera crew shows up with like, you know, a field producer, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And so it was definitely a steep learning curve. I did read a lot about improv, but that's one of those things that now that I'm getting into this, I know if I would maybe do some of that, like take some improv classes or something, I think I could get pretty good at it. But it's one of those things that I feel like I've always been the type of person to try and be very conversational and quick and witty. And so I'm relying a lot on some personality traits, I think. And definitely I have a great team there that, you know, the blessing here is that it's not live, right? So if we do maybe mess something up, we can reshoot. But a lot of the stuff where we're cooking stuff, you know, that's one and go. Mm-hmm. And so there's a really great team editing and some good team coaching me on helping me, you know, maybe not be so repetitive in things I'm saying and things like that. So it's a lot to keep in your head as you're recording, but you know, with every episode, I think I get more and more accustomed to it, and it's just a ton of fun.
Yeah. So you've learned how to think on your meat.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. This was a total blast. Guys, are there, Corey, Kendall, any other questions you want to ask before we go?
Mashed potatoes. I always have to get the mashed potato question in here.
Go ahead.
First question is, how much do you love mashed potatoes?
On like a scale of like 1 to 10, I'd say I'm like a 6 or 7 on mashed potatoes.
Oh, okay. That's
a little
that's a little disappointing, but it's okay. It's okay.
Like I don't hate them, but it depends on the type of mashed potato. Are we talking like skins in? Are we talking?
That's part of the question. That's the other half of the question.
We'll keep going.
So yeah, skins in or out, and lumpy or smooth. flavored or just straight up like cream and salt?
All right. Skins in.
Okay.
The lumpy to smooth, I think that's a spectrum, and I like it a little bit closer to smooth, but I like some lumps.
Okay.
I like a little bit texture, and I like it seasoned. But I'm not
Okay.
I'm not gonna like turn my nose up at salt and cream.
Right. Yeah,
for sure.
So if you're, I don't know if this shows my age, but back in the day when Jon Stewart was hosting the Daily Show. No, before him, Craig Kilborn, I think was the guy's name. So before Jon Stewart, he had the 5 questions. He always had like 5 questions, rapid fire questions for everybody. And for me, especially if it's a food guy, I need to know where they stand on mashed potatoes. That's all that was.
You know what? That's an important stance to take, and I appreciate the questions.
Very diplomatic. Are there any final thoughts you want to pass along about the show? Anything that we didn't cover? Any social media channels we should be sure to? We'll tag them in the episode as well. But anything like that?
Yeah, definitely follow 614 on Instagram. I believe their handle is 614 Magazine on Instagram. And then you can feel free to follow me at Tea in the Garden, TEE in the Garden. I post a lot of pictures of my dog who's sleeping in the chair next to me right now, and some other of my cooking and home renovations. But in terms of what I'd say about the show, definitely keep watching. If you have places that you think we should visit, I think there might be a spot on tastingcolumbus.com to suggest some places for us to visit. And I'd say get out there, explore the Columbus food scene. If you're not in Columbus, and maybe if you're someone a bit younger than myself and trying to think what you want to study in college, definitely consider food science as a choice. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much, or Dr. Matt, excuse me. Thank you so much for joining us here on From the Middle. We absolutely appreciate your time and love the conversation. Everyone, please go follow 614 and Tasting Columbus anywhere that you can. We're going to get this episode up on YouTube. You can find the episodes there, as well as various websites. We'll make sure to tag everything for everybody. But thank you so much for joining. This has been an absolute blast. I love talking food, so this has been fantastic. And thanks so much again, guys.
Thanks, guys.